Hello and welcome to this week's edition of World Today. After Iran's top general was killed by the US forces, now top Iranian nuclear scientist has been assassinated by the Israelis. What does that really mean for the Middle East? Also on the show, the big diplomatic war between Australia and China. What does that really mean for China and for Australia? A tell-all interview with India Today by Professor Fung, who tells us about his time in detention in China. Top Iranian nuclear scientist Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was killed by assailants on the 27th of November. While many fear backlash, as was seen in January this year when top military commander Qasem Soleimani was killed, Iran has shown restraint. This even as the region remains tensed and vulnerable.
A key part of the plan was to form new organizations to continue the work. This is how Dr. Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, head of Project Ahmad, put it. Remember that name, Fakhrizadeh. So here's his directive. It's right here. And he says, the general aim is to announce the closure of Project Ahmad, but then he adds, special activities, you know what that is, special activities will be carried out under the title of scientific know-how development.
Mohsen Fakhrizadeh was a target for long. He was identified by the Israel state head in a televised address to the nation in 2018 as the man who led the Islamic Republic's military nuclear program until its disbanding in the early 2000s. On 27th of November, he was killed on the outskirts of Tehran.
ایشون امروز در یک سفر در اطراف تهران مورد یک عملیات تروریستی قرار گرفتند و تیم حفاظت ایشون که همراه ایشون بودند در این عملیات درگیر شدند و متاسفانه ایشون زخم برداشتند و با شدت جراحات به بیمارستان منتقل شدند. البته 2 نفر از همراهان ایشون هم مجروح شدند در این حادثه. متاسفانه کار تیم پزشکی به نتیجه نرسید و ایشون به شهادت رسیدند.
Within hours, Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif took to Twitter and accused Israel for the assassination. Iran's president vowed revenge, while the lawmakers chanted death to America and death to Israel in the Iranian parliament.
این ترور وحشیانه نشون میده که دشمنان ما در هفته‌های پر اضطرابی هستند. هفته‌هایی که احساس می‌کنند دوران فشار اونها داره کم میشه، شرایط جهانی داره تغییر میکنه و براشون این چند هفته مهمه که حد اکثر استفاده رو از این روزها ببرن.
It was a reference to the lame duck Trump administration that had not too long ago reinstated sanctions against Iran. The slain nuclear scientist Fakhrizadeh had led Iran's so-called Ahmad or Hope program. Israel, along with the US and other countries, have alleged that it was a military operation looking at the feasibility of building a nuclear weapon in Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, had declared the Ahmad program ended in the early 2000s. IAEA inspectors now monitor Iranian nuclear sites as part of the nuclear deal of 2015. In response to the Fakhrizadeh assassination, the Iranian parliament passed a bill preventing IAEA monitoring of Iranian facilities. A deadline in February has been given for the withdrawal of the international monitors. This puts the onus on Joe Biden for mending US relations with Iran, something that the Trump administration was set against. In the current scenario of heightened tension, the US aircraft carrier Nimitz rode back into the waters of the Middle East. The Iranian president, however, downplayed his government's aligning with the bill approved by the Iranian parliament.
یک گمان زنی هایی که ممکنه در رسانه ها مطرح بشه که عدم حضور امروز من در مجلس شورای اسلامی به خاطر مصوبه دیروز مجلس شورای اسلامی است که البته با اون مصوبه دولت موافقت نداره و اون رو مضر میدونه برای روند فعالیت‌های دیپلماتیک.
It was feared that Mohsen Fakhrizadeh's assassination would bring matters to the brink between Iran on one hand and Israel and US on the other. Like it had done in January of 2020, when 11 months ago, Iran's top military commander Qasem Soleimani was killed in Baghdad by a US airstrike. But this time, Iran has shown restraint.
در دام توطئه صهیونیست‌ها بیفتند. اونها در فکر ایجاد یک آشوب و بلوا هستند، بدونند ما دست اونها رو از پیش خواندیم و اونها موفق نخواهند شد به اهداف خبیثانه خودشون.
The attack on Fakhrizadeh happened just days before the 10-year anniversary of the killing of another Iranian nuclear scientist, Majid Shahriari. Tehran had blamed Israel for it in 2010.
A long and tedious inquiry lay bare acts of atrocities committed by some soldiers of the Australian Defence Forces in Afghanistan. While Australia apologized and promised action against the perpetrators, it hasn't stopped some countries like China from whisking up controversies and scoring petty political points.
A fake image tweeted by none other than Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Liyan has caused a massive rift between Australia and China. Trolling Australia over its war crimes report, the official tweeted a computer-generated image of a grinning Australian soldier holding a knife to an Afghan child's neck. The child's face, covered by Australia's flag in the image, had a caption that read, "Don't be afraid, we are coming to bring you peace." It has caused a war of words between China and Australia.
It is utterly outrageous, and it cannot be justified on any basis whatsoever. The Chinese government should be totally ashamed of this post. It diminishes them in the world's eyes. I want to make a couple of points about this. Australia is seeking an apology from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the Chinese government for this outrageous post. We are also seeking its removal immediately and have also contacted Twitter to take it down immediately. It is a false image and a terrible slur on our great defence forces and the men and women who've served in that uniform for over 100 years.
But China refuses to back down. The shocking details of the report points out that Australian soldiers were involved in the murder of 39 Afghan civilians, none of which occurred during battle. China chooses to use this information to further its agenda without any mention of the fact that Australia has taken cognizance of it and promises to honor its responsibilities to deliver justice.
你刚才讲到，他说中国政府应该 feel ashamed。那么澳大利亚的军人派到阿富汗去，是不是澳大利亚政府的行为？澳大利亚有军人犯下如此残暴的罪行，澳大利亚政府是不是应该 feel ashamed？ 是不是应该为他们的军人在澳大利亚、在阿富汗残杀无辜的平民 feel ashamed？
The war at the South China Sea, Australia joining the Quad military exercises. All these are power games to assert regional military prowess. Australia and China have been at loggerheads over regional dominance. China's artificial islands in the South China Sea has been a bone of contention. Beijing's political aggressiveness also bothers Canberra. The increase in tensions began primarily after reports of meddling in Australia's political process in 2017, followed by detention of academics and dissenting voices by Beijing. Canberra responded by banning all foreign donations to political campaigns. Post-COVID, Australia is also the first country to block Chinese telecommunication giants Huawei and ZTE from its 5G network. And the conflict at all fronts of economic, strategic, military and digital continues.
What are clear sources of tension in this relationship?
Others in the region also get dragged in this war of dominance over South China Sea.
Whilst that is an exchange that's happening between Australia and China, it will of course tip into spaces where, as a general principle, we may have concerns, and we'll raise those. In this case, an image has been used that is not factually correct. It's not a genuine image. So we have raised that directly with Chinese authorities, in keeping with the way that we would raise areas of concern for us.
Thank you, the Right Honourable Madam.
But none of this stopped Beijing and Canberra to come together to join world's largest free trade deal of RCEP that excludes US and India.
Relations between Australia and China have deteriorated in recent years. Apart from warring over trade, strategic and economic issues, the two sides have also been warring over detentions. Australian journalists in the recent weeks have been detained by Chinese authorities. The latest was Australian Broadcasting Corporation's Bill Birtles and the Australian Financial Review's Mike Smith. Chinese authorities questioned both men before their departure about Cheng Li, an Australian journalist who worked for state broadcaster CGTN. She was detained in China last month on suspicion of criminal activity endangering China's national security. Joining me in an exclusive conversation is Professor Feng Chongyi from the University of Technology in Sydney. Many thanks for joining us here on India Today, Professor. You yourself were detained for 10 days in 2017. What do you make of how China has been dealing with the pandemic and how aggressive it has become with any country or nationals of countries such as Australia who are being detained, questioned by the Chinese Communist Party?
First, I would say that I'm still a Chinese citizen for the current dispute between Australia and China. I'm not part of it in that sense because I'm still a Chinese citizen, whatever the Chinese government thought about me. For my detention back in 2017, actually the Chinese government never admit they detain me because what they insist is that they apply travel ban against me. It means keep me in China, do not allow me to leave the country, and take me away for questioning or interrogation in order to have them do some other investigation. But of course, according to international standard, it's a very serious detention, a very intensive interrogation by the secret police more than a week or 10 days. Later on, because of something I could not tell, they set me free after 10 days. As I said, I am extremely lucky if you compare to others.
Well, that's right, Professor Fung. You actually are very lucky, given that you're sitting in Sydney and speaking to us today. But not many have been that lucky. One of your students who has been detained for at least 2 years now, the Australian journalist of Chinese origin, she has been detained for past 1 month. What can you tell us about what the interrogation and detentions are like in China, and what could she be going through right now?
Vindictive authority, they are entitled to do that or legitimate to do that in that way. But Cheng Li is not an Australian journalist. She of course she's Australian, but she actually worked for the Chinese Central TV station. It's quite high-profile job, and it's kind of very privileged personnel. And she, if you look at her own account for herself, she self-styled herself as a model propaganda worker for the Chinese communist regime, for the government. So she should not be punished in that sense, because she's not working for Australian media.
What do you make of President Xi Jinping and China under him? How has China changed with Xi Jinping at the helm of affairs? And the strategic war that you're talking about, with Quad coming into the picture, with the huge military alliance of Japan, India, US, and Australia?
Actually, the current situation is really bad. Xi Jinping was very poor record. But after he rose to the top, all of a sudden in 2012, all of a sudden magically he has been dressed up as a strongman with great talent and within well. He actually aspired to become a great dictator at the level of Mao Zedong, Hitler, or Stalin. If you saw the personal crime mobilized within China, the propaganda machine of the party spent no effort to make him a godlike leader. So the situation is extremely bad in China. As long as Xi is still in power, I do not see anything change fundamentally in China. The world have to deal with this regime very, very strongly. Otherwise, not only the Chinese people will suffer, the international community will suffer if you learn some history from Nazi Germany or from Soviet Union or Mao's world revolution to support revolution elsewhere. Now you can see the interference. So in a sense, I'm happy that the world has now become awakening to the real reality. Do not live in the mirage, live in the dream, to expect that China is something like other normal country. It's not a normal state, not a normal country.
Well, not a normal country, and the world has to work together to fight a dictatorship. Many thanks for joining us here in India today. Indeed a pleasure, Professor Fung.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back to World Today. Before we talk about the big breakthrough on the vaccine front, let's talk about all the other stories making news from across the world in World at a Glance.
I want to be paid.
The Afghan government and Taliban representatives reached a parliamentary deal to press on with peace talks on 2nd December. This would be their first written agreement in 19 years of war. The agreement lays out the way forward for discussion, but it is considered a breakthrough because it allows negotiators to move on to more substantive issues, including talks on a ceasefire. NATO welcomed the breakthrough and called for rapid progress on reaching a ceasefire and establishing a political roadmap for Afghanistan. The Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai was denied bail on 3rd December. Supporter of the pro-democracy movement of Hong Kong and publisher of Apple Daily, Jimmy Lai has been accused of violating the national security law. He will remain in jail till April on charges of improper use of his office space. Estimated to be worth more than $1 billion, Lai is the founder of Next Digital, which publishes Apple Daily. It is a well-read tabloid in the country that has been vocal in its criticism of Hong Kong and mainland Chinese leadership. Despite government ban and arrests of hundreds of activists, the United Front of Pakistan's opposition parties rallied in Multan on 30th November. It marked the political debut of Asifa Bhutto Zardari, the daughter of former Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto. Representing her COVID-positive brother Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the chairman of Pakistan People's Party. Asifa Bhutto received an emotional welcome and applause from the supporters. The Pakistan Democratic Movement has promised to hold another rally in Lahore on December 13th, after which they plan to march towards the capital, Islamabad. Deforestation in Brazil's Amazon rainforest surged to a 12-year high in 2020. The 11,088 square kilometer area deforested between July 2019 and August 2020, is twice the size of the city of Rio de Janeiro and represents an increase of 9.6% over the previous year. Brazilian National Institute for Space Research report accounts the rapid increase of deforestation to weak environmental enforcement laws of President Bolsonaro regime. The deforestation of Amazon has drawn worldwide attention, including expressions of concern by the US President-elect Joe Biden.
In a major breakthrough, Pfizer COVID vaccine has been approved for use by the United Kingdom. The British government is going to start vaccinating people from next week onwards. Pfizer is an American pharmaceutical company and awaits approval in the United States of America as well. Here's
an important milestone in humanity's fight against COVID pandemic. UK has become the first Western country to approve a COVID-19 vaccine, with its regulator clearing Pfizer and BioNTech's shot.
The MHRA has formally authorised the Pfizer vaccine for COVID-19. The vaccine will begin to be made available across the UK from next week. I would like to pay tribute to and to thank all those who have made this possible. It is the protection of vaccines that will ultimately allow us to reclaim our lives and get our economy moving again.
The emergency authorization clears the way for the distribution of a vaccine that is expected to play a significant role in the global effort to halt the coronavirus. The messenger RNA-based vaccine claims to have shown 95% efficacy in clinical trials. The vaccine will be available in Britain from next week. The developer of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine has begun the process of delivering the drug to the UK.
We have started immediately the process of delivering our vaccine, and we expect that the rollout of the vaccine in the UK will happen within the next couple of days.
The vaccine comes at a time when Britain's COVID death toll has neared 60,000.
From early next week, we will start the programme of vaccinating people against COVID-19 here in this country. As we know from earlier announcements, this vaccine is effective. The MHRA have approved it as clinically safe.
India, which has its own promising vaccine candidates, is yet to strike a deal with Pfizer. However, experts believe that the need for an ultra-low temperature storage and high cost makes Pfizer vaccine unviable for India.
This vaccine has to be kept at a very low temperature. It has to be kept at minus 70 degrees centigrade. Now that for low and middle income countries and a large part of the world is going to be a big challenge to maintain the cold chain, because having a vaccine to be kept at such a low temperature, especially when we're going to smaller towns or rural India, is going to be a challenge.
Pfizer's vaccine is the second after Russia's Sputnik V to be cleared for use. Sputnik, however, is being used mainly in Russia, even as it undergoes trials in India and many other countries.
That's all in this edition of World Today, but before I go, here's some news from the world of space. China has launched a small spacecraft from the surface of the moon as part of its ambitious Chongyi mission to bring lunar samples back to Earth. The ascender took off from the moon and reached the lunar orbit in around 6 minutes. Take a look.
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel, and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.